Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Yvonne deSousa is the kind of person you want in your network. She's smart, she's kind, and she's incredibly funny. When Yvonne was diagnosed first with MS and later with breast cancer, she turned to humor to cope. Her book, MS Madness, reminds us all of the power of laughter, as does her blog, YvonneDeSousa.com. Please welcome Yvonne to Bump in the Road. Hi, today I'm really pleased to welcome Yvonne deSousa to Bump in the Road. And Yvonne, maybe you can give us a little bit of background on your journey.
Well, Pat, I was diagnosed with relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis in 2009, a few days before Christmas. Merry Christmas to me. And what happened was the whole way I was diagnosed, I was luckier than most in that I received my diagnosis within a month, which is actually unusual. But it came right before Christmas, and it came in the middle of a busy workday, and I had to get myself to a city hospital 2 hours away, and it was just a cluster. And I wound up calling my little brother for a ride, and he was, for background, he was 21 at the time. He drove a huge Ford F-150 pickup truck with 2 dirt bikes in the back. And he gave me a ride to the hospital, and I, officially get the diagnosis confirmed and what we need to do. And I'm overwhelmed, and we leave the hospital. And he said to me, you can totally get one of those handicap parking plates now. And I was like, Christopher, are you kidding me? I'm overwhelmed. I'm exhausted. Christmas is next week. Parking's the last thing I'm thinking about. And he said, seriously, though, if you don't want it, you can give it to me and I'll use it. And I pictured that huge truck with the dirt bikes backing into a handicapped parking spot. And I just doubled over with laughter. It was such a release. And from then on, in the days that followed, I was still overwhelmed. I was still terrified. But when I could make fun of the terror, it helped. And I realized that laughter was a valid coping mechanism. So I started to write about that, and it became a book, a well-reviewed book called MS Madness. And then an agent told me, well, if I want to have an audience for this book, I needed to start a blog. And I was like, really? What would I write about in a blog? Well, it turns out MS gives you a lot of material to write about in a humor blog. So that's what I do. I like to think of it as using a Giggles stick to sort of beat up on these illnesses, because just 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And that, of course, like MS, is not a laughing matter. But yeah, I still was able to find stuff to make fun of on the cancer journey too. So that's kind of what I do.
No, I think humor is so important. As a matter of fact, your book really inspired me in that it made me realize I have lost my sense of humor. I don't know if it's I used to be very funny. I used to see the world as kind of an ongoing musical in my mind. And I have lost that. And your book made me stop and think that I need to go back and find some humor in everyday life.
Well, I'm happy to hear that the book was helpful to you. Thank you for saying that. And no one can blame you. I mean, your own journey has just been so overwhelming, so tough. It's not easy to find the humor in these situations, but I do think it benefits us when we try. And I've wondered often why we don't hear about this. They all talk about how stress is not good for illness. It's not good for you. It's not good for illness. It's not good for healing. And then they talk about, prayer, which I'm very a Christian, and I think prayer is a good one. But then they talk about too meditation, yoga, healthy eating, staying hydrated. All those things are also crucial, but we never talk about having a sense of humor. And scientists have shown that humor does have a lot of physically healing properties. And so I don't understand why doctors don't talk about that. I don't know if we, as someone living with a chronic illness, fears that, if people see us in a good mood or being able to laugh, then maybe we're not that sick. I don't know why it is, but I think we need to try to find a way. And there's, Pat, you had so much going on in your mind. I mean, finding something to laugh at was probably the least of your concerns. But I would suggest that when you can take time to, watch your favorite sitcom or dog and babies videos on YouTube, which is my favorite, you will feel a little better, even if it's just for a moment or two.
No, I totally agree. You bring up an interesting point, and that is the stigma of disease in that you look fine, but you feel like crap.
Right, exactly. And so many chronic illnesses and even cancer, you see someone obviously in distress and you feel for them. And then you see people like me who my effects of MS are within, and you think, oh, well, they're not really sick. I mean, I've gotten that from people that I love who are close to me, even. And that's sad and it's wrong. And we need to change that. And one of the ways to change it is not by giving into this thing that we're not allowed to be happy. Eh, You know,
No, I think that there's a big conversation, an ongoing conversation in the cancer world, talking about just that, how people relate to you. They don't know what to do or say. And I think there's a terrific video put out by I think it's Kathleen O'Brien on breast cancer. If you haven't seen it, I'll send you the link.
great.
She takes all the things that people say, to supposedly quote unquote help you. And she makes fun of every one of them. It will have you howling. I mean, it's awful, but it's funny as can be.
Well, that is funny, and I definitely want to see that. In my book, MS Madness, I do that with MS, in a chapter called "The Top 10 Things to Never Say to Someone with Multiple Sclerosis,"
Yep.
and then the top 10 answers you might get back if you do. So my sister also has MS, and so she helped me with that a lot. We had a lot of fun working on that chapter. So I would love to hear what did you say the author's name was? I definitely want to see the video.
I think it's Kathleen. Oh, it's Kathleen or Catherine O'Brien. I'll find it and send it over to you for sure.
Great.
Because it's you will just howl. You will get it totally.
Yeah, definitely.
So what are some of the what are some of the worst things people say to you?
They're full of crazy suggestions. That's number one. My personal favorite is "You don't look that sick to me." And I want to say, well, great. Can you call my neurologist and tell him, because he's got a different opinion? Those were a couple. Of course, cognitive is one of my issues, so I'm blanking on some of them. But we came up with 10 good ones. And one of the best things that someone said to my sister when she said, I'm sorry, I've just figured out I've just been diagnosed with MS. This older woman looked at her and said, "Oh, damn." And it was perfect. And that's all you really need to say. It was the perfect response. So, on using humor in the response, I had to have a bilateral mastectomy regarding the breast cancer, obviously. And before we knew how it was all going to turn out, one of my friends said, "We're going to have a goodbye to your boobs party." And they did. They showed up with pink champagne in honor of breast cancer and a boob cake, which was a riot. I have twisted friends, but they knew I'd be receptive to it, and it was great. We had a fun night, so it was.
Now,
It was
I
good.
trust that the cake didn't go anywhere near vegetables because you are incredibly vegetable phobic, aren't you?
Yeah, me and vegetables, we don't get along, but I'm trying little by little. I try. It's gotten better very, very slowly. You hear of baby steps. These are like infant kicking its feet in the air steps as far as my getting better with vegetables. But this whole healthy living journey I've actually been doing a lot better. And I think if there's any positives that can come out of a cancer diagnosis, was I took that a lot more seriously, especially when it came to exercise. My area has a fabulous team of people to help you post cancer, and the cancer, I think, was really a wake up call. MS was a little bit of a call, but the cancer really was a wake up call as far as drinking more water, exercising more, all those things. And the cancer was new, and so I've only just finished. I had my final appointment on looking at everything last December. And I joined a gym and I was into it, man. I was like working out like crazy. I was enjoying it. I was loving it. I was taking things I liked. And then COVID-19 happened and the gym closed. So trying to do other things, but yeah, definitely.
Some people have made comparisons with COVID-19 to cancer or any sort of chronic illness. What are your thoughts on that?
Not so much with cancer, but I did a blog post in April where I think people who live with chronic illness, such as multiple sclerosis, we were prepared for this COVID-19. Let me tell you, like, all of a sudden I heard all these people, oh, I'm so bored 2 days in. Or like, I gotcha, because I'm like not bored. I know how to hang and stay in my PJs all day. So I think at least we were a little bit more prepared. So I don't know. I haven't really thought of it. I mean, it certainly, there was a little bit of a doomsday feel, I think, in the beginning, at least for me. And I think when you are diagnosed with cancer, you of course get that doomsday feeling. But then, you know what, I got a little used to it, and then I started using the humor, watched a lot of sitcoms, read some funny books, and yeah, I think that might be a comparison that I would liken it to a lot.
Yeah, no, emotionally, physically, and socially, I mean, they're different experiences, but I think, you're well prepared for the social aspects of isolation. When
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned being 87 with your MS. So my question is, do you ever get to regress and, like, be 3 years old too?
Oh yeah, absolutely. MS has so much material, and I've done a post about that. I can pinpoint times when I felt like I was 5 years old and 87 in the same day. Like, it's really interesting. The 5 year old part came. My dad was driving me to a doctor's appointment, pretty far away, and I had to use the bathroom, but I knew we could make it. And then we got into a wicked big traffic jam, and so I made the comment, like, all of a sudden I said, I'm an adult. Hey, Dad, like, I think we need to pull over. I'm going to need to use the restroom. I don't think I can wait. But in my head, it came out like, Daddy, I have to go potty right now, really, really bad. And that's what I mean as far as like trying to make fun of this stuff. And then the car was just a little bit too cold and the wind was a little bit too hot, so I can do both in the same day very easily.
No, your book is a hilarious stream of thought. Um, is your daily life that funny where it's a hilarious stream of thought? Are you always looking at this and finding the humor in it?
Every new weird experience, my mind then drifts, and often, I wouldn't say always, but often, I'm able to go. And I don't know if any of your listeners are writers or creative. I like, just yesterday, I read an article that really surprised me about COVID-19. And it talked about the impact of a person's blood type on that. And then I got in the shower and I wrote a whole blog in my head about just how crazy that is and why aren't we hearing about it? Why didn't we hear about it before this? So I think that's going to be my July blog. So it doesn't always happen, but it can. I can take an ordinary thing and my mind goes off and it goes down this funny path. And before you know it, I've written something crazy that, just crazy.
I think you've really tapped into something in the MS community. I don't know that anyone else is as consciously and aggressively using humor to deal with really a tough set of circumstances.
Well, in that regard, I have to do a huge shout out to my friend Doug Ankerman. He's a couple years older than me, and I discovered Doug when I was coming up with this idea to do a humor blog. And his blog also uses humor to tackle MS, but from a male point of view. And I think a male point of view, the humor is a little bit different, a little bit more slapstick, I think. But I read about Doug's blog in the MS Society magazine, and I was like, man, somebody else is doing this. What a jerk. I can't believe he's doing this. This is my idea. Never mind that he was already doing it. But I calmed down, sat back, and I reached out. I read his blog and reached out to him. And now we've become the best of friends and we share readers, which is crucial because there's enough of this to go around, and if you find something humorous on one post, you might find something humorous on another. So we share. I said share reader. Well, yeah, because it's a blog, readers. But Doug's blog, for anyone interested, is called My Odd Sock. And he is also very funny and he focuses on MS in his blog. But you can, and I just want to say, and everybody look it up. I hope you enjoy it, but don't enjoy it more than you like my blog, which is YvonneDeSousa.com.
One of the things you write is it's not just about surviving, it's about living well.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And I learned that lesson early on. We had a family friend who also had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and a very sad, not fun person. The type of person you see, you get bad vibes from because he's so down. And when I started this, he was very harsh, and he said, "There's nothing funny about this illness. There's nothing funny about multiple sclerosis." And I respectfully understood where he was coming from, and we had a conversation. And then he made the comment, about the only good thing from his standpoint of being confined in a wheelchair is he has a great view of people's butts. He could host a butt judging contest. And I was like, you see, that's funny. That's hysterical. And we talked about it, and he did lighten up a little bit. So, yeah, I think it really does say a lot. And, there's the physical aspects of, adding joy, easing anxiety, relieving stress. There are studies that have shown that laughing has a pain factor, has an easing pain factor. And then there's also other medical benefits too, like laughing strengthens the heart, it boosts immunity, it helps improve your memory. So I think we need to talk about this more, and I think that when they do, people realize they do feel better. And we need to keep it in perspective. I'm not saying laughing all the time is going to take away your chronic illness or the severity and fear of your cancer diagnosis. It won't. But I think it will help within it. And I think that that's really important. And I'd also just like to make sure your listeners are aware. I'm not laughing at the severity of these things. These things are traumatic, and they're horrible, and they're scary, and they have such an impact on your lives. But what I am saying is, when you can take a moment to find a little smile or a giggle, it's nothing but good. And so that's what I, like my readers and your listeners to take away from the work that I do.
I think we really need a little more humor in our lives. I couldn't agree more. I forget what it was that set me off. It was sometime in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Something struck me as funny, and I just had the biggest belly laugh. And 2 things occurred to me. 1, I haven't done that in a while, and 2, God, that feels so good.
Right, exactly.
Tell you, if you could go back and rewrite your life, would you?
Um, I there are some things I might have changed, but overall, no. Like I wanted to be a rock star. I don't know why I didn't get around to making that happen. I mean, I guess it's never too late. I can't sing, but minor issue. But overall, I think I would say no. I think, yeah, I mean, we all make choices. We wish we had done things differently, but the big picture, probably not. I'm very blessed. I live in a beautiful area. I have wonderful friends and family. So no, I think not.
Are you wiser as a result of your life path?
Well, I think so. But I think we can always be even wiser still. When I look at the younger relatives in my family, I can see, things that I wish they knew and wish they would trust me and to impart to them. But I mean, you also have to learn it on your own a lot, right? And I know that we can always keep learning. There's never a time when you can stop learning. But I do, I also believe that you have to stay true to yourself too. And I sometimes will do like minor courses teaching people about getting a book published. And I have this twofold bit of advice that I think's to work with life too. You absolutely have to listen to others who have been your path and learn from them and get their experience. But by the same token, you shouldn't laugh. You shouldn't listen to other people and get their experience. And what I mean by that is take in everything that people share with you, take it in because it's crucial and it's important and helpful, but stay true to yourself deep down. And that the lesson I learned was when I wrote my book. I was very clear I wanted it to be a humorous book. And my publisher got me in touch with an editor, and we talked over the phone, and she seemed fabulous, and she seemed to understand my vision. And, she'd been doing this for a long time. Well, this was my first book. And I got the edits back, and I was so disappointed because it was so not what I, you know, was looking at. And I had a timeline in my head and when I wanted the book to come out. So I was trying to work with it, but I was just more and more distressed that it was not what I was trying to say. So I finally talked to my publisher about it. And, the first thing, well, this person's been doing this for a while. They know what sells. They know what works. And I'm like, and I really had to stick to my guns. So they wound up pairing me with a new editor. And we started from the beginning, which was a huge time commitment that I wasn't planning for. But in the end, I think worked out much better. So that was a case where I had to say, no, I know what I want the book to do. This is not a medical memoir that's going to tell you the ins and outs of this illness. There's other ones that do that. This is what I want mine to do. So I hope I haven't just rambled, but that's what I mean. Whereas I had to take the edits from that editor and listen to them, but then ultimately I had to know my own self. And I think that applies to life too.
No, I agree. I think sticking to your guns is really important, and it becomes really important in dealing with the medical community.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I had that experience with my first neurologist, and she was known as one of the best in the country. I was lucky to have her, but her and I just didn't gel. And each appointment, I started to feel like my concerns weren't that important, because she was working with people who were in advanced stages of MS. And I respected that. And I started to feel like mine weren't that important either because of that reason. But then each appointment, it became like, that's not the way it should be. And so eventually I did leave and have a new neurologist who I love. And it happened again with breast cancer. On the opposite side, I live in a very rural area and we have one hospital. And I met the cancer team that were going to handle my case. And everybody said, you need to go to the city. That this is a small town. They don't know what they're doing. You need to go to the city. And just the idea of every appointment having to drive into Boston was the city nearest. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And I like these people and I understand what they're saying. And I stayed with them and I couldn't have gotten a better cancer team as far as I'm concerned. They were just fabulous. And so, I think in life, listen, I didn't automatically dismiss people who said, go to the city, but I listened to their advice and I thought about it and I weighed it and I'm like, no, I like who I have. I'm staying here. So I think that's what you need to do.
Yeah, no, I think you have to take in a lot of data. I know when I went through dietary changes, one of the things I did, you're not going to like this, but I became vegan for a while,
Mhm.
and I was miserable because all I could think of was life without cheese is not worth living.
Right.
And I'd open the refrigerator and there was nothing I wanted to touch, but I learned some important things in doing it. I learned how much dairy I ate. I learned to become more conscious of it. Unlike you, I liked vegetables. That part was not hard. But
Good.
I think you have to experiment and I think you have to put yourself out there and decide what works and what doesn't.
Right. Right. I mean, and I give that advice about listen to everybody, but don't listen to everybody because I don't want people to be closed off. I think that's the problem is when you're closed off without getting the input, get the input, weigh it, and then listen to your true self.
If you could distill your experiences down to a few points, a few pieces of advice for people facing a bump in the road, what would you say to them?
Giggles are good for you. That's my motto and I stick by it. And that's giggles are good for you. I think anybody facing a bump in the road, just try to remember that when you can. I think it's going to make your road a little bit easier. And I think if you can laugh here and there on the road, before you know it, those steps have gone by and you're just a little further down the road if you're laughing at some of the steps you're taking. So.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life. Bump in the Road is a production of Cancer Road Trip. Subscribe to the podcast, follow us on social media at Cancer Road Trip, and you can learn more at www.cancerroadtrip.com. Until next time, be safe and be well.